Well, Saturday wasn't the best day for VAR in the Premier League, so much so that we had to bring in Craig Burley and our VAR guru in Dale Johnson to talk about the two disallowed goals that we saw for West Ham and Newcastle. Craig, the West Ham goal coming against your former team, Chelsea. So Chelsea clearly benefiting from that one. They went on to get the win after West Ham really puffed and fought very hard in that match. But thoughts on that one? You feel that they were definitely hard done?
Oh, 100%. And I think one of the ways you've got to look at it is, it is a contact sport. And I know in the last 10 to 20 years, the dangerous sort of challenge of trying to eradicate, and that's acceptable. But you think about it from West Ham's perspective. If Jared Bowen, who I think had slightly lost his balance just prior to trying to make the challenge, if he doesn't make the challenge, then he's got David Moyes. You're not going to go for that ball. I didn't want to go for the ball, Gaffer, because I might have got I might have collided with a goalkeeper, or I might have fouled the guy, whatever. So a forward's always going to go, or a player's always going to challenge for the ball. Keepers expect that. Now he come flying out. Edward Mendy clearly had one eye on Bowen himself, and spilled the ball. Now I'm not arguing, and I don't think anybody's arguing that there was a little bit of contact there, but I don't know if it was enough contact for Mendy to be injured, and two, to give a free kick. I think he's within his rights to challenge for the ball, as long as it's not a dangerous challenge with the studs in the face or the studs up. Then I think you got to be prepared for that. And so from that perspective, I do think it was incredibly soft.
Dale, how did VAR get this wrong? I suppose, as you said, there's one of the big criticisms now is that when you're called to to see the video assistant referee and you're constantly looking for something, you almost keep looking until you find something enough to get wrong. Is that kind of what happened in this case?
Well, I think the case with any type of foul in the build-up to a goal. I mean, we saw it in Manchester United versus Arsenal on Sunday when the goal was disallowed for a foul by Martin Odegaard. By Martin Odegaard. It comes to that point where you judge the line is crossed from it being normal football contact to it being a foul. Now, obviously, in this case, the VAR, who's Jared Gillett, he thought that the contact by Bowen was enough to cause the goalkeeper to be injured and therefore not be able to challenge for the ball. Now, this is the line you've got to work with and decide, is that contact done that? Now, I don't think it did. The vast majority of people don't think it did. And I think it's the type of situation where we don't want to see the VAR getting involved in. Now, we've seen a few incidents in the last week or so with goalkeepers getting with contact on them. Sometimes the foul's given, sometimes it isn't. And most of the time, they stick with the decision on the pitch in these situations. And that's what they should have done here. They should have trusted the referee, who was Andy Madley, and he got the decision right at the time. But unfortunately, the VAR got involved, and this is where we are.
Newcastle were also denied a goal against Crystal Palace. Craig, what did you think of that one too? Just another horrible mistake again.
Well, I couldn't believe it when I saw this one, I have to be honest, because I mean, Mitchell clearly pushes Willock into the goalkeeper. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I remember a couple of years ago when former colleague, it seems to me at the moment, Peter Walton, who I believe still works for our friends at BT Sport, making some referee calls. I remember sitting with Peter in the studio here in the States at ESPN FC, and we were debating stuff. And as someone who, before I moved here, did probably 2 or 3 co-commentaries a week, and was always looking at sort of monitors, Peter said to me, as a referee, it's quite difficult to look at replays. And I honestly thought it was one of the most stupidest things that I'd heard about how you couldn't decipher a replay and it wasn't that easy. Now, I'm not suggesting it's difficult to look at a monitor and come up with a reasonable answer or solution. But my God, these referees are doing a grand job of showing Peter was right, because a lot of the times you think, okay, a referee's missed that at full speed. That's acceptable and understandable sometimes because the game is so fast. But how the hell can you go over to a monitor or being stuck with Park and VAR? You look at that and then you don't think you need to send a guy over to the monitor, or he looks at it in the monitor, whatever the decision is. And when you can clearly see a push, and he hasn't taken himself into the goalkeeper. Now, if he wasn't pushed, he might have been able to avoid the goalkeeper, Joe Willock, in his natural stride, but he was pushed off balance, and I don't understand how you can. And I think this is one of the major problems and major concerns, that if you're looking at a monitor and you're watching replays and you're not able to understand what you're seeing, that's a massive problem. That's not technology, that's just personnel.
Dale, what do you think about that?
Well, I think this is a really important point. I think people think that referees can just do both jobs, when clearly there are a different skill set needed to be a VAR. And I think certain leagues are starting to realise that now. The problem is that the VAR in this Newcastle game was Lee Mason, who was now a full-time VAR. So that's all he does. Yet, do we really know that he's good enough as a VAR, or are we just taking everybody that retires and putting them into the VAR room when they might not actually be up to the required standard to make these decisions? Now, you've got to hope that the people that are the full-time VARs really aren't going to be making mistakes like this. The reason given for the goal being disallowed was that the push, or the as the VARs are calling it, normal football contact, wasn't a push at all, and that's the reason they give. Now, we can look at this time and time again, and we can clearly see there's an arm in the back, and actually Joe Willock is trying to position himself to head the ball before he gets pushed into the goalkeeper, and he may even have got his head to the ball if he hadn't been pushed. So I just think sometimes they look at replays too many times and they try and find a problem when a problem isn't there, and it's just something they're going to have to get right with further training and experience.
And and just 1 second, Alexis, Dale, who did you say? I know Mike Dean is one of the full-time VARs. Who did you say the guy was at St James's or for the St James's Park game? Lee
Mason.
Right, that's right. So Lee Mason and Mike Dean, retired officials, but now current VAR operators, are two. Now, you might not think they've been the best referees, but refereeing, as we all know, at full speed, whether people agree or not, is very, very difficult. Very difficult job. There's no doubt about it at full speed. But these are two of the most experienced officials, having officiated, certainly at the top level for over a decade, but probably having officiated for 20 to 25 years. That's a problem. That is a problem. We're not talking about some young kids stepping up from non-league or League Two or whatever and getting their big chance and getting caught like a rabbit in the headlights. We're talking about two guys that have been in the middle in some of the biggest games in English football.
Let's remember. Let's remember that Mike Dean was the VAR for the game a few weeks ago for the Chelsea versus Spurs game, where he has himself admitted that he should have issued a red card for the head pull. So yeah, that's your two full-time VARs making high-profile errors in the first few weeks of the season.
Which goes back to the point that a lot of people over the last, 2 or 3 years or 4 years since VAR came in across the board were, VAR technology is terrible. And I know there's a bugbear sometimes about, time frame and blah, 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 and, how far do you go back? And I know it's not a perfect science, but most of the problems here, 99% of the problems are not technology, and they're not the VAR, video assistant referee. They are actually the human beings still judging these situations. The technology within itself, and I know the offside's been updated this year to try and give it a little bit more clarity and a little bit more freedom, and I think that's a good thing. But when you have these experienced referees who have all the technology and angles generally available to them, still making decisions that are not 50-50. I don't think the ones we're talking about today are sort of 50-50. You go down the pub, half the bar thinks it was, half the bar thinks it wasn't. Whilst you might get one or two, I think it's pretty concrete that most think that both were bad decisions. And when I think you're down that line, it's telling you that the referees just haven't got it right.
Well, it's come clear now that PGMOL, which is a refereeing body, they've pretty much accepted that these decisions were wrong. The Premier League want a meeting with PGMOL in the coming days to discuss those two specific incidents. And PGMOL
what will come of that meeting, though, Dale?
Well, yeah, it's going to be interesting, because what can come of it, really? I mean, the only outcome that's positive is these mistakes stop happening, and I don't think those mistakes are going to stop happening just from a meeting over these two decisions. Now, what the Premier League have put in place from the start of this season is a new independent panel to look at every major incident that happens on a weekend. It might take them quite a long time this weekend. And that is 3 former players, a representative of PGMOL, and a representative of the Premier League. Now, they sit down and they go through everything, go through decisions, and then they give the clubs involved their thoughts about whether they think the decision was right or wrong, or what actually should have happened. So this is just going to fold into part of that process. And I think they hope that this is going to be one of the steps, and this sort of extra transparency with the clubs, which we won't get to hear about, by the way, unless the clubs tell us, is that will help the referees to make better decisions if they're having an input and feedback from this independent panel. Now, that might help to an extent, but there's a long way to go to make referees, I guess, trusted in the Premier League again.
And you can help me out here, Dale. I don't know if this has already happened, but I know there is a change, or there's going to be a change with Mike Riley and Howard Webb. I don't know if that's already happened. Certainly I saw something about it last week. Yeah.
So Howard Webb's got a contract with Major League Soccer till the end of the season, which finishes in November. He's not got a firm start date yet, but that will be, I guess, after the World Cup. I guess he'll come in end of December, start of January, and he's replacing Mark Riley in one of 2 new roles, which Howard Webb will be the chief refereeing officer. So his job is going to be to improve these standards and to reshape things. Now, a lot of people saying, oh, PGMOL are doing nothing, nothing's changing. There's actually a huge change going around in the background, of which Howard Webb is one of them. There's now the elite referee development plan. There's new managers for the Premier League referees and the EFL referees, and they've really reshaped everything. Now, of course, that doesn't mean it's going to be right, it's going to work, but they are actually taking steps to change the way that refereeing is run and VAR is run. Now, we're not going to see the results of something like that in 5 minutes or 5 weeks. It might even be a couple of seasons before we finally see the results, but they certainly needed to do something.
The one thing I should just briefly address, and I know Dale mentioned it was an independent panel with some ex-players. This notion that, and people may or may not agree, this notion that VAR should be operated by ex-players is the biggest nonsense I think I've ever heard, and I'll tell you why. Because never in the world of punditry has there been more cheerleading from pundits who should know better, but yet basically go onto networks and they have become a parody of their club channels, such as their bias towards their teams, and so it just can't happen. Unfortunately, there are a lot of players out there who are objective, but there are also a lot who are not, and they're well known to the public. So this notion that all of a sudden, a few retired ex-players can just swan in and right the wrongs of VAR with no squabbles or with no contentious decisions being made, is just ridiculous. The referees just have to be able to make better decisions. They won't get it right all the time. Of course, there's going to be subjective calls. There's no doubt about that. But some of the decisions that we've seen this year and over the last 24 months, and it's not just the Premier League, but we are heavy in the Premier League, it's been pretty much unacceptable.
It sort of swings one way or the other. Like at the start of the season, we didn't have any intervention in the first round of games, and there was things missed, like the penalty to Brighton and Manchester United, for example. And then we go to this week, and we've got 10 or 11 interventions, and they're intervening on things which are really borderline and we don't want to see. So it's almost a battle between, we're not getting involved, or we're not getting involved enough, so we need to get involved more. Then you get involved more, or we're getting involved too much, and that's when we need to get involved less. So we'll probably end up in a situation next weekend where we see things we think should be changed and they don't get changed. And it's just a constant battle for that middle ground about where to get involved.
Well, maybe the PGMOL believes you've been getting a bit lazy with your Twitter feed, Dale, and they've got to make sure you get your you make sure you keep you busy enough on your Monday VAR. So maybe that's what it is.
I don't need to be watching any of the games to know when something's happened. I'll tell you that. The Twitter feed soon lets me know.
But just on that point too that Craig was saying, because it's something that we've obviously now everyone would know at ESPN, we do cover La Liga quite closely, and we've seen this especially last season a few times when the referee has consulted the VAR and then sees it, revises it, and then still sticks with his own decision. Do you know if now in the Premier League, at least even if you've spoken to any referees, if they're at least encouraged to kind of be more bold with sticking with their decision, or is there still that pressure that VAR has to be the gospel?
Well, we finally got it on Saturday when Michael Oliver stuck by his decision to give a penalty to Nottingham Forest, which was brilliant. I mean, but we want to see it now. We might not always agree if a referee sticks with his decision, but that has to happen, because otherwise there can't be any real trust in the system. That's the first time it's happened in the Premier League for 18 months, going back to February 2021. It didn't happen all last season. Now, the problem is the Premier League say, oh, we've got this high bar for intervention. We want it to be minimum interference. So that's why they believe that if they've got such a high bar and they send an incident to the monitor, then it's obviously going to be an overturn, because they would not send it to the monitor if there wasn't an error. But the problem with that is, as we've seen this weekend, it totally relies on the VAR himself never making a mistake. Now, as we know, that's never going to happen. There are going to be occasions when the VAR's subjective opinion is not what the referee wants to do. So you really need to have several instances of the season where the referee sticks with the decision. Now, it should be rare, because the whole point of VAR is you're only doing clear and obvious errors.
Yeah.
But it should still happen, because then you have trust in the referee's own opinion, and you're not believing it's just the VAR room which is controlling the subjective nature of the major decisions.
I think Paul Tierney was in that mindset today, Dale, or in the Manchester United Arsenal game. I think clearly the length of time he looked, because when in real play he had a clear view from about 8 or 10 yards away of the actual infringement. He didn't see it as an infringement. I'm sure he saw the contact, which was minimal. But once he went to the monitor, you're absolutely right. The consensus, apart from Michael Oliver at the weekend, as well, he sent him over. It's going to be overturned. But I think when we saw Tierney go over to the monitor, and the amount of times, and then at one point they really slowed down the replay to it was a super slow in the end, just to see if there was any contact. And I just sensed in his mind that he still felt potentially he had made the right call in real time. But now that he was over at the monitor, there was a little smidge of contact and a little bit of pressure to change it. And I felt that was a perfect example today of a referee who didn't walk over, saw 2 quick replays and go, do you know what? I got that wrong. It was a foul, move on. He was over there for a lengthy period of time, Dale, which told me that he wasn't sure about overturning his decision.
He was definitely considering. You could see that he was asking for several different replays. Now, one of the other things with the monitor is the process is that when the referee goes over, he's shown the angle which proves that the decision is wrong. Now, there could actually be another angle which proves the referee's right, but the VAR is being shown. The VAR is showing the referee, you've got this wrong. So it was quite good of Paul Tierney, because he's allowed to ask for other angles to confirm that he wants to change his decision. So he clearly was in some amount of doubt about disallowing that goal. And like I say, I'm not sure he really wanted to, but he certainly went with the VAR in the end. It was a strange decision, really. I mean, I think it could have gone either way. I think if you're looking at that in real time and in the flow of the match, you would not be surprised at all if there was a foul there, because he didn't get a touch on the ball. And I think that was a major point for the VAR in sending the referee over. But I think we'll see similar situations like that which don't get sent to the VAR monitor, and that's what frustrates people. For instance, we had a sort of a similar one between Fulham and Liverpool at the start of the season, which was a foul on Henderson before Mitrovic scored, and that was a similar one where there was contact on Henderson and nothing on the ball. The VAR decided that there wasn't enough in the challenge to rule out the goal, but then you get to Manchester United versus Arsenal, and they do rule out the goal.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.